If you find the prospect of getting on stage and talking to hundreds of people, or even just doing a Zoom presentation at work, utterly terrifying, then this is for you. My name's Hazel Gale. I'm a former therapist turned author and creator of the Betwixt app. And after publishing my first book back in 2018, I found myself face to face with the sickening reality that I now had to promote the damn thing, and that this meant public speaking, something I'd been scared of for as long as I could remember. At first, I did what any self-respecting adult would do. I ignored the problem. A lot. I ignored it even when I started getting booked for talks, which of course only added to my anxiety. Fast forward a few weeks though, and I'm stepping off the stage to be met by, I'm not joking, tearful hugs and high fives from complete strangers. Aside from the first 2 or 3 minutes, I'd spent the entire time in front of a few hundred people feeling grounded, purposeful, and at home. And what I'd said had moved the audience to tears. I would never, ever have expected this. Now, I'm not claiming to be an aficionado of public speaking, by the way. I'm just someone who got over a fear and managed to do a good enough job on the day. This video is the first in a 3-part mini-series about how I made the shift from terrified to perfectly functional, and how you can too. First up, and very briefly, you need to know that if you're afraid of public speaking, then you are not alone. We fear this kind of performance instinctively because we're wired for connection and have an evolutionary need for inclusion and acceptance. The prospect of publicly making a fool of ourselves is terrifying. Thankfully, there are ways to bypass, or at least minimize, this natural reaction. In this video, I'm starting with the most practical tips. How to begin working on a talk that feels meaningful and inspiring for both you and your audience. For the talk I mentioned above, because I was so nervous, the urge to procrastinate was super strong. By the time I got started, I only had a few weeks to write and learn my talk around my full-time therapy practice. So I needed a way to get going. I used Mel Robbins' 5-second rule. It's beautifully simple. Act within 5 seconds of having a thought like, I should start writing my talk, and you can circumvent the otherwise inevitable flood of rationalizations for your urge to avoid the thing. You know the one, that interminable string of reasons for why you should absolutely, definitely, categorically not begin. These thoughts, as I'm sure you're well aware, can paralyze you at best, or will at worst have you pulling every book off your bookshelf in order to rearrange them into a rainbow. To avoid that fate, as soon as you notice the I should thought that you actually want to follow, count from 5 down to 1 and make sure that you have stood up and started moving in the direction of the task before you get to 1. This sounds too easy, I know, but it works. Right, now that you have some momentum on your side, it's time to ensure that you'll be delivering meaningful content that you know thoroughly. My next step was to define a purpose for my talk, my overall intention. To do this, I set out to write one sentence that encapsulated my core aim. I can't remember where I got this from, so I can't reference it, but it's so great. Here's how you do it. Start with a sentence that begins with the word to. Then complete that sentence by describing the impact you want your talk to have on the particular audience you'll be addressing. For example, to share powerful but simple presentation tips with people who fear public speaking. This sentence will give you a filter. Material that serves your intention makes the cut, anything else gets edited out. Next, think about who you want to be on stage. For my talk, I wanted to be myself basically, a human, not a robotic expert. So I chose to open my talk with a personal anecdote, rather than a sort of boastful intro or bunch of stats. I'm not saying everyone needs to do exactly this, of course, but I would say it's important to think about the picture you paint within those first few minutes of speaking, because first impressions tend to be quite persistent, and we usually don't have that long to win the audience over if we start out sounding like, I don't know, Elon Musk. So who do you want to be on stage? And how can you convey this within the first few minutes of talking? Once you have your intentional script ready, the next step is to practice. The only thing worse than listening to an unprepared speaker who keeps checking notes, mumbling to themselves and flicking through their own slides to find stuff is being that speaker. This, to me, is utterly terrifying. So I pretty much learned my first talk verbatim, which was easier than I thought. It took about a week. If you want to do this, a clever trick is to read through your presentation before you sleep. Studies have shown that our rate of learning can be significantly improved if we revise before climbing into bed at night. At first, I worried this might make me too nervous to sleep, but thankfully that didn't seem to be the case. But if you do this, don't only practice while lying in bed. Once you're familiar with the content, practicing on your feet helps you to program in a physical blueprint for the presentation, and also to learn things like changes in stance, pace, and volume, as well as pauses, gestures, and facial expressions. At the end of the day, no matter how you do it, make sure you practice. It makes the world of difference. So that's the practical stuff out of the way. If you do those 4 things during the writing stage for your talk, if you plan for procrastination, clearly define your core intention, work out who you want to be on stage, and then practice the presentation effectively, you will feel much more ready and capable come the day of your talk. And, well, you'll deliver a better talk. But if you're as frightened as I was, then you might need more than just this. So please tune in to my next video for how to reroute that nervous energy into something much, much more helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share so others can find it too. And finally, if you'd like to take an epic journey through a magical world in the name of personal growth, then you can download Betwixt, the mental health game, which is available on the iOS App Store and Google Play.